Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for this discussion, this Google Hangout on food and farming under climate change, moving towards a global agreement. Lots of challenging issues to talk about. My name's Elwyn Granger-Jones. I'm the Director for Policy Partnership and Operations in the Global Environment Facility in Washington, D.C., but I'm actually here in Paris on the margins of the science conference on our common future under climate change. Fantastic event, lots of interesting discussions, and we want to share with you a great side event that we just participated in on food and farming under climate change. I've got two fantastic guests who can introduce themselves, please.
Thank you, Alvin. Michel Mordasini. I'm the Vice President at the International Fund for Agricultural Development in Rome.
Thank you, Elwyn. Lini Wollenberg from CCAFS, which is the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Research Program. I lead the Low Emissions Agriculture Program.
Okay, so please tweet us any questions you have, which is our address is hashtag AgCop21. That's AGCOP21. Hashtag AGCOP21, and I'll try and share them with our guests. Now, these two are on the panel of the event we just had, and maybe we can start, Michel, by saying something about why this event took place. What were we here to discuss?
Well, we are really shaping the conversation for the COP21, and I think it was really a moment of special importance to see how the host of the COP21, France, is actively involved in trying to make sure that agriculture is well positioned in this conversation on the big challenge related to climate change. And for us, being involved at IFAD to these conversations is very crucial, because basically we want to take any opportunity to make the case that smallholder farmers in the developing world are part of the solution.
And if I could ask you, Lini, why are smallholder farmers part of the solution?
I should then also share this report that was released today on the mitigation advantage, which documents IFAD's investments, and maybe Michel also would like to say more about it, in smallholder adaptation and how these can have a mitigation co-benefit. And so the event really looked at to what extent smallholder emissions contribute to overall global emissions. We know that about 1/3 of global emissions are probably, or up to 1/3 of global emissions are contributed by smallholders. But we also know that through agricultural development, with food security as a priority, that we can probably achieve mitigation co-benefits. And that's really the point of this report. It quantifies those benefits.
And Michel, does that mean we should all be doing just climate mitigation projects with smallholders?
Well, definitely not. At IFAD, basically, we have a broader understanding of the challenges, and basically the first focus is to look at some aspects of the realities, and these realities are that we are, first of all, 70% of the rural poor living in the rural areas, and we have also a large number of smallholder farmers who are basically producing 80% of the food in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia. These are elements of the reality. So obviously, smallholder farmers are connected and related to greenhouse gas emission. But more important for us is that they are also the most exposed and the most vulnerable to climate change. And as I said before, we strongly believe that they are key player, key actor to find and to shape solutions. So when we say then adaptation versus mitigation, at IFAD, we basically, from the start, quite a few years ago, said we invest in adaptation with co-benefits. And I think the work that has been conducted by CCAF and FAO to help us produce this report on the mitigation advantage, respond to this query in how much of the adaptation agenda, the investment made in adaptation, relates and provide this co-benefit in terms of mitigations. And I think we got some very good and encouraging and very stimulating outcomes.
you know, I got the sense in the discussion that people were really struck that IFAD set up this, what is it, $300 million adaptation program for smallholder farmers that was focusing, as it says, as it says on the cover. It was an adaptation program in how many, 30 countries is it? And yet we did this study and found that the potential emissions impacts are huge. It's what you call a co-benefit. But Lini, and someone asked, are we just looking at the glass half full here? I mean, is it all co-benefits when it comes to smallholder adaptation? What about the world of trade-offs that most of us think of in terms of, you know, a plus and a negative?
Right. So certainly in addressing vulnerable populations, we won't create additional constraints to the agricultural development options that they have. You know, we're first looking for populations that can take a little bit of risk and adopt technologies that might be further on the curve of development, further down along the curve of development than some of the technologies that are available now. So we see the need for smallholder engagement and mitigation through agricultural development, but not all smallholders necessarily.
But Michel, this is very high level. So just give us an example. Some of the stuff you're doing in IFAD, possibly through ASAP, that is adaptation, but also has mitigation or reduces emissions.
I think one of the 13 projects which have been looked at in this report relates to the Kyrgyz Republic, for example, where we have been investing quite heavily in livestock development as well as rangeland improvement. And I think one of the very important lessons that we got from this scientific review of what has been achieved there is that really there is, from better preserved rangeland management approaches, better health for animal care, there are elements that also then relate very directly to the mitigation agenda. And we are getting from this example in the Kyrgyz Republic that a situation without the project, the emissions would have been much higher. So we have here a very concrete example that through investing for more resilience, better land and water management and livestock health systems, we are also having smallholder producer being fully part of the global efforts for reducing emissions.
Perhaps I could give a couple of other examples. And one of the best ones that I know of is looking at alternate wetting and drying in rice systems. It's a very mature technology. It's been practiced through large parts of China and Japan. It's been tested in the developing world as well. It can reduce the emissions of methane from paddy rice by up to 30%. So we're working with the Vietnamese government right now, which is very interested in alternate wetting and drying and in mitigation in the agricultural sector generally. They have a goal of reducing agricultural emissions by 20% in 2020. They have an interest in saving water because of saltwater intrusion in the Mekong Delta. And they are working with us to, together with the International Rice Research Institute and the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, to identify where in the country this technology might be suitable, because it will not be suitable everywhere or for all farmers. To have farmers in a very participatory way identify what are the barriers to adopting this technology. And I think we do need much more of that farmer-driven input into the development of these technologies. And we're looking at the economics, and we have some very positive numbers suggesting that the returns to AWD could be 17 to 41% higher than what farmers are already doing.
Wow. So I mean, in a sense, what you're saying is you're out there helping smallholder farmers help themselves, and when you're doing that, there's this side benefit. Trying to use a better language than co-benefits, which is rather technical. There's this spin-off. There's this unexpected benefit, which is often not measured, not recognized. And you're saying recognize it because it's potentially up to 30% of global emissions. Someone said of global emissions from agriculture.
In this case, the methane is the only gas that's reduced by AWD. So we can reduce in a farmer's field, we can reduce the methane that's produced by 30%. Someone
said, why are you even thinking about that 30%? Why not the other 70% on the people that are are less poor.
Right. So the question was, why look at smallholders? This was in the event. Why look at smallholders when we know that smallholders are only contributing about a third of the emissions globally, and therefore medium and large holder farmers are contributing the 70%. And the reason is, in short, it's a hypothesis, if you will, or it's a guess, that in order to achieve the 2-degree target by 2100, we estimate, using models that we produced with various collaborators, including EASA, the University of Aberdeen, and about 17 other groups, that we need to reduce emissions in the agricultural sector by about 1 gigaton of CO2 equivalents per year by 2030. In order to do that, we're pretty sure this is going to require either 100%, it's unfathomable, 100% adoption by all farmers around the world, given the current technologies, or it's going to need some kind of massive technological innovation. And so based on that, given that smallholders contribute about 1/3 of emissions, we're proposing, why not give smallholders the option? Why not be ambitious? If indeed there's climate finance that could be channeled to smallholders, if there's agricultural development that will be channeled to smallholders that can be enhanced with funding from climate finance, why not seek mitigation as well?
Perhaps from IFAD perspective, we see let's say the issue from a different angle. In a sense, I think obviously we focus on a close knowledge of the realities we are confronted with at the village and in the communities, in the very remote, vulnerable communities. And there, obviously, the first priority for IFAD is really to shape some proposal to respond to the challenge for more resilience for these poor families and for the smallholder farmers. What is important is that then there is a link with what you are mentioning, is that through the effort of adaptation, which will remain very central at IFAD, we are looking at how to support the smallholder farmers to adjust to the new realities that comes from the climate change evolution and challenges, and how they basically have to shape again, I think, the way they are conducting their business at the farm level, or even looking at some alternative and complementary activities. But this is for us the point of entry. And then it's very crucial that we remain cognizant that then there are a side benefit that comes from these activities. And I think it's perhaps one of the elements that will help having this divide on this issue of adaptation versus mitigation. I think we believe the two can be linked in a proper way. But for us, as an investing institutions focused on smallholder, the priority is and will remain on adaptation.
It's fascinating. So then essentially you're coming at this from the mitigation angle for this study, you're coming at this from the adaptation angle, and you're saying you're meeting in the middle, and you're saying in leaving no stone unturned on mitigation, you can't just ignore this tremendous potential side benefit from helping this part of the population respond to climate change, which is absolutely essential, right? Is that the...
Can I just clarify? We actually call our program Low Emissions Agriculture intentionally, because we're not driven by mitigation. Our program is driven also by food security.
Right.
And so we're looking for opportunities for agricultural development to reduce its emissions, not to achieve the mitigation target absent of a food security agenda.
I got you. And should smallholders be rewarded for this emissions efficiencies and reductions that could come from this?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to make a slightly prior point to that, but it leads to that, which is that looking to the future, we often talk about a business as usual set of emissions. And I think that smallholders should be acknowledged for adapting to climate change, and that there should be finance and transfer of technology to support adaptation that then may have these mitigation spin-offs, and not to assume that adaptation is business as usual. Because if we assume business as usual, that adaptation is business as usual, we're not going to get the support for adaptation that it needs, and it really needs a massive investment. So smallholders in that way should absolutely be compensated. Whether there should be a carbon market, in agriculture is very difficult, simply because the precise monitoring of agricultural greenhouse gases is extremely costly. And I don't think the current carbon market framework would lend itself well to this. We've had a few preliminary pilot projects. I do think the carbon market could contribute to agricultural development with maybe proxies of sorts, but to measure carbon credits would be problematic, especially at small scales.
I just, Helwin, I do want to follow on what has just been said. I think we need really to have really realistic scenarios. And I think the realistic scenarios moving forward is that we need to have a massive increase in investment for adaptation and sustainable agriculture development. We are in a year where we have a sequence of events that will lead to the COP21. I think next week, Addis Ababa will talk about the financing for development. There will be also in September, the New York event on the Sustainable Development Goal. These events for IFAD were very crucial to position food security, nutrition, sustainable agriculture at the top of the agenda of this conversation. Because again, I think a response that is basically focused on climate change will require a very broad understanding that from the budget in the partner countries to the donor community in the broader sense, we need to rally and we need to see investment in adaptation as a contribution that delivers also some very positive outcome at time on the mitigation front.
Thanks, Michel. Now we've got a question here. Great question. It said, we're having this mile-high discussion, 10 miles high discussion, which is really important. But what's the reality from the actual ground in terms of how the smallholders you've worked with actually see all this? And so can we just, perhaps you can just try, and Michel, perhaps, because IFAD is working with so many smallholders in so many places on these questions. What's been the sort of experience on the ground? And how do you draw the connections between that and what we're just discussing here, these major global issues too?
Yeah. No, I think it's very important. And I think it's really a very important question to relate to the realities and to the work. I think from what we have seen and what we are seeing at village level, in the rural communities, in the very remote, vulnerable areas, is that climate change is a reality now. And I think it impacts already many in terms of planning and forecasting their planting seasons. Then there are some floods. Then there are many issues that relates to temperature and unprevisible development. So this is a reality we have to confront now. The approach we have at IFAD is that we engage and we give high importance to organize communities and to get the benefit of farmers' organization, cooperative structure, informal groups of women or producers to be the partners in terms of better understanding the changing environment and also shaping solutions and also the way that these communities are really becoming actors for change. So again, sorry, it's a bit, again, I hope not too stratospheric, but the reality of IFAD is one reality that deals really with the people and deals with the village realities and the rural communities. And again, I think climate change is a reality of now.
And just to add, for whoever's asked that question, I guess you're watching us right now, the experience that certainly I know my colleagues in the Global Environment Facility who are working with and through agencies, and I know you've experienced in ASAP, the work you're doing in IFAD, is this huge uptick in risk. All the dimensions of risk, whether it's increased flooding, whether it's increased drought, whether it's lack of predictability, the rain season, it's harder to predict actually when it will start and stop now. And so this rather hostile environment for a number of farmers is changing so quickly, right? That it's actually a little harder or a lot harder for them to cope. And the projections are it could get more so. And you're saying that there are actually many tools and techniques, technologies and approaches that can help them cope better with that, right?
That's it. We strongly believe this at IFAD. And we believe, in addition, that a lot of tried and tested approach exists. We do not need to reinvent all solutions to all the problems. Of course, there is a need, and there are some areas in terms of better assessing the risk and the vulnerabilities. We need better tools, we need better baseline, we need better modeling. But at the level of finding solutions at the field level, we know on how crop diversification can play a role. We know the techniques and the way of improving rangeland management. We know the practices on how to improve animal health systems at the very local level, with the local authorities, with the civil society and the different partners. So the question is more, how do we access these smallholder farmers and connect them with the extension service, with agricultural research, with the access to market, with the access to rural finance. I think this is the challenge of the next generation of investment that are required in these areas.
And Lini, that's great. I mean, to what extent is this about new technologies or just being able to make better use of existing, including indigenous and homegrown technologies?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No farmer likes to talk about carbon as the reason why they're doing farming. They're farming because they want food or money. And so it really is about existing practices that they might be using already or that are being introduced that could be generating these spin-offs, as you said, for mitigation. So I think Michel already summarized quite well the different ways in which agricultural development works. And we're not talking about transforming agricultural development per se. It's an ongoing, difficult process of problem solving. And it's really about somehow bridging, the farmers' world and their own innovation capabilities and networks. And one thing we do know quite well is that farmers who are well connected to networks, whether it's other farmers associations or church groups or religious groups of any kind or government extension networks, those are the farmers that tend to innovate first. And we also know that having access to credit, any kind of rural banking system that is giving them better access to credit is another jumpstart. So, I think we know what needs to be happening. It's happening at an increasing pace, I think, in many places. We are seeing progress, but mitigation doesn't introduce anything new to that process per se. It's still agricultural development.
I see. Now let me turn to something else that we discussed in the side event we just had, which is this great big conference. Another great big conference is going to be happening in Paris in, what is it, 3 or 4 months now, which is COP21, the UNFCCC Conference of the Parties. Great expectations, all kinds of elements to the climate debate being discussed there. What do we want to see on agriculture and smallholders from all that? Michel?
Well, I think we hope that agriculture remains firmly anchored as an important item for conversation during the COP21. As I said, I think the hosting country, France, is doing a lot, and really it's a privilege to see the level of energy that is deployed by France in terms of making this happen. Now, an area that will be for us extremely relevant because we want to relate to action is the agenda for solution. And we hope that through the process of conversation among the international community, getting the benefit of this week's event of scientists meeting and thinking together about the challenge and some lessons, but looking also at all that we generate, hopefully, some way that will confirm elements for the way forward. From IFAD perspective, we are, of course, very attentive to the fact that too often the voice of the rural people themselves is not listened to or is not heard. It's silence. And we have already undertaken some steps to be sure that farmers' organizations from different parts of the world will be represented at the COP21, and we are supporting for this to happen, because this conversation has to be as broad as possible, and obviously smallholder farmers themselves have to be part of the conversation. If I may, one element that we have to look at carefully is that hopefully the agenda of solution will not be only a scientist list of issues for fundamental research to move for the next 30 years. This is important and will be there. But what will be crucial too is that there is a better recognition that the linkages between agricultural research and the delivery to the populations that may use and get the benefit and get the opportunity to translate this into action is also secured. This is the hope that we have in IFAD, that this question of getting the necessary support for this linkage between agricultural research extensions is also taken on board.
Okay, thank you, Michel. Lini, what's your sense of that too?
Yeah, no, very clearly there's a need to better link adaptation and mitigation, not have them in silos. There's a need to better link the forestry and agricultural sectors. And I would love to see bolder ambition in the agricultural INDCs, the contributions of each country to the overall emissions reductions, but then as well to see pledges that enable those to be achieved.
So concretely, you're saying you want more recognition in various texts that agriculture is really a key part of this challenge. You want something that reflects that mitigation and adaptation are in some senses both sides of the same coin when you're talking about solutions. You want some extra emphasis, whether it's an initiative or something that really helps drive momentum for a change of approaches in agriculture to achieve food security. Right? Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah.
And recognition within all that smallholders are actually a big part of the agriculture story, therefore a big part of the climate story.
Exactly.
Okay. We are pretty much running low on time. I wonder, now we had some, I should have mentioned, we had some really excellent participation in the event. We had the French Agriculture Minister and the Director General of the European Commission's development work. Now they basically communicated the message that they really want to see agriculture be able to respond to climate change. I mean, that resonated presumably with you guys. So did you get the sense that actually there's a common agreement in the agriculture community on the way forward, or do you still sense that there's divergent views and still a lot of rethinking and paradigm shifts or whatever you want to call it to be done? A nice easy question to end with, Michel.
I think this is a very complex one. I would say that obviously these issues are not completed. The conversation is ongoing and there are many perspectives that have to be accounted for. We still have divergent views still from the developing countries and the developed countries. And I think this is part of getting a better collective understanding on the challenges in front of us. So I would not say that we have reached that point now. I think there is still a lot of work on the COP21 path. So, yeah.
So please, Lini, what's your sense of the state of the debate?
Yeah, I agree that there's difference, and I agree it's evolving. I do see coalitions forming, and the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture is a good example of momentum towards groups coming together towards a common agenda. But I don't know that we have to have everybody having a single agenda. I think it's healthy to have some diversity.
Yeah.
So there you have it. And then clearly IFAD and CJR through CCAFs and other aspects of members of CJR will be at the center of that debate. And I certainly also hope that the Global Environment Facility, through the many lines into this debate we have, including our integrated approach program that's just been launched on food security in Africa, will also be a contribution to the debate. So thanks so much. And thank you all for watching and for the questions.
Thank you.
And we're done.
Thank you.
Yeah.